Hey guys, this is Future Edit Ollie. I was just coming in to let you guys know before the episode starts that there is kind of an annoying echo in my audio in this episode. And it's annoying enough that some of you might not find it listenable. I'm still hoping it is okay. We're not 100% sure why it happened, why it was just my episodes, why it was just my audio. But we are gonna try and get that fixed during our next recording session. I was just unable, unfortunately, to edit it out. But I still hope you guys enjoy the episode anyway. Mysteries, histories, and occasionally conspiracies. I'm your host, Ollie.
And I'm your co-host, Belle.
Today, we are going to be doing another bullshit token. Because it's just where I'm at. When you guys listen to my next episode, you will understand why I didn't have time to research another episode.
Yeah. Today's content warnings are as follows: mental illness, kidnapping, disappearances, human trafficking, and brief mentions of abuse. While these do not necessarily fully encompass all the trigger warnings that we have for today, because we tried to jot as many down as we could think of, today was a bullshit episode, so please try and account for that. Any additional trigger warnings are within that realm. So if you feel that you are not going to be able to, if you are not in the correct headspace to listen to these topics today, we encourage you to move on to one of our other episodes. The opinions expressed in this podcast are the sole views and opinions of Belle and Ollie with a Wild Mystery Podcast Appears. These views are not intended to harm, offend, defame, slander, or negatively represent any individuals involved in a case.
So,
what are we talking about today?
The question I want to start with, like the topic suggestion, is what are our thoughts? There's this recurring theory when it comes to disappearance cases where people, in like pretty much every case, there is always the thought, like, what if this person intentionally disappeared? Like,
what if they just ran away?
Yeah, what if they ran away, intentionally, like, vanished into thin air? So what do we think about those? That theory?
Oh, man. I mean,
for me, it depends a little bit on the case.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I was actually about to say.
But generally speaking,
I feel like it really depends on the situation, because, like, most of your average Jane and Joe will not be the type of person who's involved in, like, a bunch of shady shit to where they have to, like, escape and disappear and, you know, pull some movie shit. But, like,
are generally going to be in a sound state of mind. But even with really severe depression, you can get to a point where you want to.
Yeah. Well, and then it's like, you know, factoring in emotional and physical abuse, familial situations. I think with those situations, yeah, absolutely. There's like a ton of people who have just like up and disappeared with the help of other people and organizations to help them escape from horrible family situations or cult situations. And so I feel like those are pretty common, but like, again, your average person who doesn't have any of those situations, what's the motive?
Yeah.
Why are you choosing to disappear?
And my thought is always, like, because, you know, with really, really severe, like, depression, bipolar disorder, things like that, it can get to the point where that is something that occurs to you. But my thing besides that is, how is it possible in today's day and age? Because, for an example, a lot of jobs you get certified for, and you get certified under your legal name. And how do you get a job without that certification?
Without having falsified documents, which most people can't afford what needs to happen for those to exist. And that's not even factoring in, like, jobs where you can work with sketchy people who are willing to pay you under the table.
Exactly. There's that, because the other thing is that you also, on top of, like, certification, there's also taxes getting paid under your legal name. When you open a bank account, you have to provide like, your ID and stuff. Like, what do you do when you need your social security number? Like, I think there are a lot of ways that it is not necessarily possible to live off completely, like, just vanish, you know? I don't think it's necessarily possible to even live fully off the grid unless you are literally
choosing to homestead, live off the grid.
Yeah.
Be a full
like,
registered
physically
hermit.
off the grid. Like,
yeah. Like,
go full Snowden. And
I think unless you're in one of those situations where it is those high level scenarios where it's like, I don't want to say unrealistic, but unrealistic to like movie level, where it's like how many people are going to be in a situation where they have the amount of money that you need to have in order to create an entirely new person, and with all the documents that kind of go with that.
And how do you do that as just yourself without help?
And then if you have kids, that complicates things even more. And don't get me wrong, you can go to a lot of backwater towns and be like, you know, hey, blah, 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 blah.
You can lie on your resume, and it does work a shocking amount of time.
Yeah. And it's like you go into smaller towns and communities, you go out to rural Alaska, other states have plenty of rural areas in which the population is like 15 people. You could, in theory, do it, because a lot of places in the world also, and then you think about it, there are off-grid communities where they don't care who you are or what your name is, and they operate under oh God, what's it called? I'm just going to call it anti-capitalism, because that's really what it is, but it's like trading goods and services, like, I hate to say it, like, in the way that it should be, but, like, in the way that it kind of should be, because, like, the whole thing is, it's going to turn into an interesting topic change, but it's, like, having to pay for certain things when you could, like, trade someone and be like, well, here's homemade bread that I made, how about I trade you for 15 potatoes?
And the money simplifies things, but it almost simplifies things to a dangerous extent.
Yeah, because then, you know, you're having to take all of your money out of your bank accounts well in advance, or you're having to leave all of that money behind, because you can't use any digital tracking.
It looks suspicious.
Yeah.
If you're looking up stuff like
how to disappear.
Like, that also. And additionally, if you, like, do you go Gone Girl and fake
your death?
Yeah. Or do you literally just vanish? Like,
just like, oh, you know,
make it look like you were plucked off the face of the earth. Like,
yeah. You know,
or make it obvious that you were trying to disappear. Because if you do that, how do you research where you're gonna go?
Yeah. And you know, and you can't.
How do you buy plane tickets, or
exactly? It's like you can't buy a plane ticket. Depending on where you're at, you have to have toll roads. So then you're buying a, you know, beater with a heater to transport across state lines and get to where you're trying to go. But then you have to avoid toll roads. You know, you go to gas stations. You don't want to use your card, because then that's just creating a digital path to where you are. But then you have to have enough CCTV. And it's like, there's so many factors that go into this. I don't doubt that it's possible, but the amount of preparation that you would have to do without getting caught up into that point, or leaving a digital footprint, is high.
But there's also things like, if you wanted to research where you would go, or I don't know, buy clothes not traceably, you would have to download, like, a specific browser to go onto the dark web so that you would be hypothetically untraceable. Although I'm sure that there are ways to trace you on the dark web, you know?
Oh, there are.
Yeah. And
I assume.
there are... Yeah.
Because there
are people that are smarter than me and know more about the internet that I'm sure know. But you apparently can't download it on certain operating systems like Mac OS, you know, and specifically, I don't know about Windows, but I wouldn't be surprised because Windows is a little bit more customizable, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, and that's not even talking to like, that's just the general population. And that's, I think, kind of what we're talking about. Is we're not talking about anybody who has these, you know, let's call them extremist situations, where the general population isn't going to find themselves in that situation.
Yeah.
But the general populace is not going to have the technical know-how
to be able to pull
to
it
do
off.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, okay, so let's go ahead and take it, like, let's say the Brianna Maitland case, right? So she effectively just is gone.
Yeah.
There's no information. No one knows where she is. And she left 2 paychecks in her car. So, like, with her case, she just, you know, there's not a lot of evidence. There's no theories. She had no motives for wanting to disappear. And in all instances, it seemed like she was pretty happy with her life. So, if she did just up and choose to leave, why?
And that...
And how?
That question bugs me sometimes because there's all the people that say, like, oh, this person couldn't have been depressed. Like, we would have noticed, or... Yeah.
Sorry, I just rolled my eyes really heavily.
There's, like, having been very, very severely depressed... And knowing that there were a lot of people who I spoke to on a daily basis who didn't notice. And, you know, it's not me blaming them because there is no way, like...
People who are in that have a tendency to hide it because all it is then you feel like you're burdening another person.
Yeah, it's not...
And it
like,
just
you feel
is
like
a
it's
vicious
not their
spiral.
Problem. And then when you get to the point where you are, because I've reached this point, where you are so depressed that you're not trying to hide it anymore, you've reached a point where you've been isolating yourself, you've been behaving in depressed ways for so long that people don't necessarily notice that change. But there's, like, people don't realize how
many markers there are.
Yeah. And people don't realize, like, how chemical it is, I guess. That it's not like you're depressed for a reason. Right? It's like it's not
where people who have depression are not choosing to be depressed. It is a chemical imbalance in your brain.
It's like you don't have the flu for a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There isn't a reason that you're depressed most of the time. Like,
yeah.
Acute depression for things like, you know, a family member died or whatever, that's different.
But
for
clinical depression.
Chronic depression, yeah. And it literally can, like, you can be diagnosed with, like, acute, I don't think they call it acute depression, but, like, temporary, essentially, depression after a traumatic event in your life, after a death, you know, something like that, where they do prescribe you antidepressants on sort of a temporary basis. And then you have chronic depression, which is sometimes treatable and sometimes isn't.
Yeah.
And luckily, most of the time, it is treatable.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's kind of like a misnomer. It's like, it's treatable, but it's more like remission.
Yeah, definitely.
Because no matter what, you can be treating it. You still have your high days and your low days. But to
assume that, like, this person can't be depressed because I can't see a reason that they would be depressed, or this person can't be depressed because nobody in their life noticed that they were depressed.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to be citing things like, well, they smiled and they laughed and they were very talkative, they were very outgoing, they were always wanting to participate in things. that doesn't seem like a depressed person.
Mm-hmm.
But to say, well, yeah, they isolated themselves and they seemed like they were down lately and, but I don't think they were depressed. Like,
yeah. It invalidates the, like, actual situation.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there are people who are just acting because they don't want you to, like, you cannot 100% say that somebody did not have depression unless
and not everyone goes to the doctor for depression.
Yeah. The idea of people saying, well, mental illness couldn't have played a factor in XYZ is not necessarily gospel. Like, you can't say that definitively in any case. Unless it's solved. And even then, sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
But
it's just,
like, basically, I think the point I was trying to make is, like, depression could always be a reason that even if somebody, looking at it, you're thinking, I don't see a reason that they would have wanted to leave. Mental illness is always a possibility.
Yep. Well, and it doesn't even just have to be depression. It could be anxiety. It could be schizophrenia, paranoia, bipolar
disorder,
dissociative identity disorder.
Mm-hmm. It could be any number of, like, millions of mental illnesses that we couldn't name.
Yeah, there's many things at play with that. But one thing that always drives me crazy is, and I feel like this happens with women more than it does with men, is well, you sure they didn't just, like, run off with some guy?
Yeah.
Have you met a woman? Have you met a single woman? Most women don't do that shit.
Like, the idea of meeting a dude and they want you
to come live with them, run away and come live with them.
Yeah. They want you to completely isolate yourself from your friend. Like, that is red flag central, my man.
And yes, some people, not just women, some people do not have, I don't want to call it emotional intelligence, but not everyone was brought up with that level of hyper awareness, I guess, as I'm going to refer to it as.
Not everybody, like, thinks that way.
Yeah.
And not everybody necessarily picks up on stuff like that.
Like, something that drives me... Sorry, go ahead.
A lot of people have been in enough abusive relationships growing up and, in their adult life that they don't realize what is a red flag.
Yeah. They grew up with it as a pattern of toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
But, something that really irks me, I gotta kind of remember my point now, is,
basically my thought on that is, like, I can see where the motives would exist in just disappearing. I'm just not sure how possible it is.
Oh, I do remember what I was going to say. Sorry. It finally came back to me. Is that not everyone has, like, a hyperfixation on, like, paying attention to details.
Yeah.
Or red flags. Or it's oh God, what's it called? It's it's a form of hyper awareness. And it's but you're always at, like, attention. So, like,
that's a trauma response.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, like, another thing is, like, it's also a symptom of ADHD is being, like, overly hyper aware. So something that bugs me is, like, and I'm going to kind of use a relative experience to explain it to people who might not realize that this is a thing that a lot of people go through, and especially, like, women, or people of color, is that if you're at a gym and you're working out, and let's say that you're an overweight individual, or you have body dysmorphia or body image issues, you feel like everyone is looking at you, that everyone is paying attention to you. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to read something online that says, well, everyone is so worried about themselves that they don't have any time to pay attention to you. And while I don't disagree that that's probably how most of the general populace is.
There is always that 1 out of 10.
There's always that 1 out of 10. And actually, I feel like it's more like 3 out of 10. Because and am a detail. I'm details all the way. I notice when people have different earrings in. I notice when people change their glasses. I know when people change their hair part like differently. I am so hyper attentive to details. And I don't mean to, it just happens. So I make crazy observations about people. And people are like, well, why are you looking? And it's like, well, I'm not meaning to. It just kind of happens. Mm-hmm. And so that for me is the closest descriptor of how I can explain how I am when it comes to dating. So a lot of people tell me, oh, well, your standards are too high. Well, yeah, because I don't want to get murdered. And while I don't fit the general idea for beauty standards in the U.S. or in the world, I am heavier set. I have brown hair and blue eyes, and I'm pretty happy with how I look. But most of the general population isn't gonna. I'm not the person that people chase, and I'm perfectly happy with that.
But a target is a target.
Exactly, and I also have tattoos, which people say, oh, well, that makes you not attractive to traffickers. That's, statistically, piercings and tattoos make you less attractive to traffickers. But that doesn't exclude you from people, from fitting a certain type for someone who wants to hurt you. Mm-hmm. And no one said that it has to be traffickers who are taking you. It could be kidnappers. It could be you fit someone's ideal body type somewhere.
Or you are just a convenient
victim. Convenient target. So while I know I'm less likely to get kidnapped as a result of my tattoos and being heavier set, I'm still attentive as hell. Mm-hmm. For example, when we were in high school, Ollie and I went out to this... we went to, I want to say it was a Shakespeare play. It was over remember when we parked in Fifth Avenue and we walked over and it was with your parents? Yeah. So we were walking back, and because we were going to, this just goes to show you how long ago this was, is when The Cursed Child came out. And we were walking back to my car, and it was parked in Fifth Avenue parking garage. And we walked past this bar, and it was just Ollie and I, and we were both in high school. And I was quite a bit skinnier at the time. And,
both female presenting.
pretty girls presenting females. And these three guys came out of a bar right behind us, literally in a straight line. Instantaneously, I was on alert. Because I saw them when we walked past, and then I saw them come out of that bar and walk right behind us. And they weren't exactly walking slow. I'm Alaskan, 9 times out of 10, I have a knife on me. We got to the crossing guard, which is like with the crosswalk before it, and the light was like
literally across the street from this parking garage.
Yep. And so I, of course, as soon as I noticed, I started telling Ollie, I think...
To give you an idea, this bar that we passed was literally on the same block as this theater.
Yep.
Like, literally, it
was a block
went
away.
Like half a block down to the corner, turned the corner, and walked down the block, and then the parking garage was across the street, like, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. And this is all in one block perimeter, basically. So about halfway down the corner of the block, so halfway through the block is where this bar was. And so I let Ollie know what was going on, what I had observed, and I had already kind of gotten my knife, and I had moved it into my front pocket and got my hand on it because it was a spring-loaded knife. And then I also had my hand on my keys, and so I let Ollie know what my plan was, is we were going to get to the crosswalk, and whether or not the light was red or green, whatever, if there was a walk or do not walk, we were going to break into a run, head for my truck. I would unlock it right before we got there and hop in the truck, and I was like, I don't care if I'm in or not, you lock those fucking doors, because I can fight. And not that Ollie can't, but I know I
can't. So
I think you've got it in you. But I can fight. And also I have longer legs, and so I figured we'd both be in the car roughly at the same time. But so, it was weird, and it was suspicious, and it made us acutely uncomfortable.
Well, and there's also similar example. When I was in a school in Savannah, Georgia, there was this, like, on my way back from the pharmacy, there was this specific route that I usually took that, like, kind of walked me through, not like a garden per se, but like just this area where there were some trees between the road and the sidewalk. And in the daylight, I felt totally comfortable doing that. I can see what's going on, everything. There was this one time I was walking home and it had gotten darker faster than I expected it to. I was at the pharmacy later than I meant to be, Things had generally, like, gone later. And I was walking back to my dorm and I went to make that turn and then I stopped because I was like, I couldn't see anybody. And I was pretty sure there wasn't anybody, like, hiding there. But the trees, like, there was enough trees and foliage that there could have been someone there that I couldn't see. And I decided it was safe, like...
It's not worth the risk.
There's a 99% chance that nothing is going to happen to me if I walk that, like, literally half a block where these trees are. But you don't know for sure. Like, there is always somebody who is that 1%,
Yep. So the kind of pairing this back in is people intentionally disappearing as likely is, to me, very much less diminished. There's a lot of sick fucking people in the world, and just because you think you don't meet the specific type of society doesn't mean that you're not someone's type. So being hyper aware, like, it's kept me alive, and I refuse to be ashamed by the fact that I have this, like, hyper awareness, because, like, that's your body's survival instinct telling you this is how you're going to make it out of this situation alive. And while those 3 guys who, came out of the bar behind us,
there's a high probability that they didn't,
and
it was,
but we can't take that risk. No one should take that risk. And while I'd love to believe that the world is kind and good and that people are, helpful and all that stuff, the likelihood is Anchorage is not a safe place. And we were pretty close to, actually, you know what? We were on 4th. Fuck, we're lucky we didn't die. Jesus! We were on 4th!
Yeah.
Holy fuck! How did we make it out of there?
Yeah.
4th Avenue in Anchorage, Alaska is not exactly the safest place to be.
Which is wild because it's literally, like, that street, literally a block over from, like, a extremely populated mall, like 2 blocks from the museum, which is one of the probably nicest buildings in the town.
Well, you know what's crazy too is one of the sketchiest bars in Anchorage is literally right across from where the cops park their cars.
Yeah.
It's Gaslight.
Yeah. We have, this neighborhood that we are recording in right now, we have a big issue with package theft, which I didn't know until recently. Like, but it is also a place where a lot of cops park their car. We have a cop literally living across the street.
Yep.
Like,
and one slightly down the street too, right? Yeah, you got 2.
We have there are a lot of cops that live in this neighborhood or just park their cars here because it's the farthest that they can take their cars out of town.
Yep.
So, like, this is where they switch out their
car
for their personal car.
Yep.
And we still have an issue with that. So, like, this is just to say, because you are in a good part of town or
in a safe community.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you are safe 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I am generally an optimistic person when it comes to personal safety. And maybe it's literally just because I'm lazy and I don't, like, I would rather leave my car unlocked for half a minute while I run in to grab something from the pharmacy or whatever, which is not something I generally do, actually. But I pretty much, as a habit, lock my car. But it's also nice that I have a hybrid car. It's the kind of car that, like, when you put your hand, if you're holding your keys, if you put your hand into the handle, the driver door automatically unlocks, and just the driver door. So I can lock my car, and I know I don't have to take out my keys to get into my car, So it's not like a massive inconvenience to me to lock my car, even if I'm just running in for half a second. But that is the kind of thing where I'm like, I have 2 cats in this room, and on the other side of the door there's all these, like, I mean, it's an unfinished basement where we have all the power tools and stuff, right? And I will literally, the lights are on the other side of the basement, right? So I will literally just leave my door open while I run over to turn off the lights at the end of the day so that I know where I'm going when I come back. Mm-hmm. Even though the cats could run out in that time. Like, they could easily run out and I would not have any idea because they have so many places to hide in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
But I leave it open anyway because I'm like, it'll just be a minute, like, you know? So I think that's another difference between us is that...
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was about to be like...
I generally assume the best, and you generally...
I don't know if it's like, I try not to...
assume the worst, but, like, assume it could be, I guess.
Yeah. I tend to be a little more on the cautious side, because I generally tend to be a pretty optimistic person as well. I know I kind of sound like a doomsayer, newslayer, whatever.
Like, but generally, you take the extra precautions, whereas I don't take general precautions sometimes.
I mean...
And this is not like, you know...
Yeah. I don't want to take it at face value, you know? Because it's like, there are certain things that I do that you probably don't do, because, like, most women might leave their grocery cart that they just emptied and leave it next to them because they don't want to have to walk and leave themselves exposed for longer outside when it's dark. I put my cart away.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, like, there are other things, like, if I'm parked next to a sketchy car, which is idling, I could climb in through the passenger seat. But generally, I can think of this example that happened literally a couple weeks ago where this happened. And I did pause, took into consideration, there is a person on the car. They're in the driver's seat, though, and I'm getting into the driver's seat. So they're half a car away from me.
And it wasn't like a panel van or anything, yeah?
No.
Okay.
Dude's on the car. Like, he's in a fucking compact. Like, I can see him.
Oh, okay.
I can see him on his phone. Like, you know, I feel okay getting into my car.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah. It's that situational awareness, and it's that ability to look at the situation and go, okay.
It's probably okay if I don't take the extra 5 steps, you know?
Yeah. Because it's like, okay, if it was a van with a sliding door that was, like, right next to your driver's side...
I'm not 100% sure that I can see everybody
walking my candy ass back into and being like, I need an employee to walk me to my car because it's sketchy as shit.
Yeah. Or wait for a witness, you know?
Yeah.
And there's, like...
Well, because I had this happen when I was in Fairbanks. So I went up to Fairbanks for... Okay, well, not like this exactly. I mean, not with a van. Let me put it that way. I had another odd occurrence while I was there. And, but I was at Fred Meyer's in Fairbanks, Alaska. I had gone up to Fairbanks for work. And I was... it was, like, my first day there, and I'd never been to Fairbanks by myself, and it had been, like, literally a decade since the last time I was there, and I had gotten a work truck, and unfortunately, it was like a 1996 to, like, early 2000s Dodge pickup. It didn't have a key fob. It was literally, you turn the key.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, this thing had a CB radio. It had roll-up windows. It had a cassette tape player. Like, I felt like I was back, when I first learned how to drive. Because I first learned how to drive not in a totally legal sense. Let's just put it that way. I've been driving various vehicles since I was 2 years old. Don't worry, I started on a snow machine and a 4-wheeler, but I've been driving for a really long time. But...
Did you say 2 years old?
Yeah, I started driving a snow machine when I was 2.
Really?
Yeah.
How would you even reach the handles?
They make kids' snow machines.
Oh, okay. I was literally imagining you driving an adult-sized snow machine anyway.
Like my actual current snow machine. That's hilarious. Have you never seen a kitty cat?
I forgot that they existed. But...
Oh my god, I'm not even kidding that... For a second, I actually thought that was a picture of me and my grandpa. I'm not even kidding, on Google.
That's adorable.
Because that was pretty damn similar to how we looked. Yep, so this is what I grew up for snow machining on. And I actually hold the record in my family for being the youngest person to make the entire trip from the parking lot to the cabin by myself without stopping for breaks or complaining. And it's a 5-mile drive.
Oh, okay.
It's not just like a little trek. It's, you still come up to my, okay, when it's my cabin, I'll bring you. We'll have a good time. Anyway, so I was leaving Fred Meyer's. I had picked up some groceries for myself, so that way I wouldn't, like, spend as much money on takeout, which I totally spent anyway.
Yeah.
Because I was bad. And as I was walking to the truck, it had a really bad turn radius, and I don't think it could pop out of 4-wheel drive, so it was, like, very shaky on the turns, so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like how my Dodge was.
Yeah.
And this guy, and so I had parked kind of farther back towards the back of the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some cars, but there were not a lot of cars. So I, being the hyper-attentive person that I am, saw this guy start to approach me. And he was not approaching me slow. Like, he started kind of... So basically, you know, you have multi-lanes of...
Yeah, like, imagine a grocery store parking lot.
Yep, so you had, like, lanes. So, let's say it, my vehicle was on the left. And then we had the space where you drive one way. And then you had the lane on the right. And he came at me in between two cars parked over there from that lane and started and approaching me. I saw him, and normally I wouldn't have done this, but past where I was walking, if I continued any further, there were not as many cars. Ergo, there would be less witnesses. Mm-hmm. So I saw him, and I had already had my phone in my hand, so I unlocked my phone, turned my entire body towards him, and I, like, stood up as tall as I kind of have a tendency to hunch over. I stood up and broadened my shoulders as much as I could, looked dead at him, and picked up my phone. And he stopped, I shit you not, in his tracks, seemed to, like, pause for a second, and then was like, "Can I borrow 50 cents? And I was like, "I don't carry change." And I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I called my mom because I have quick access on my phone to where I can call her without having to look. So I had, like, had it call her, and I was like, "I don't carry change." And then he was like, oh, okay. And then he kind of turned around and walked away. And at that point, I was already on the phone with my mom, and I made my way to the truck very quickly, got inside. And what's worse is I had to put groceries away. There were suicide doors, so I had to open up the suicide door to put the groceries in the back, which means not only am I spending time unlocking the door with a fucking key, opening one door, opening the other door, and there was only the one step for the running board. Ugh. I hated this truck. I was so done driving at the end of this week. But, like, the fact of the matter, and people, you know, some people would be like, well, like, you know, he was obviously just needed your help with something. The fact that he approached me as quickly as he did, he was following me, and then subsequently paused when I addressed him and made it seem that I physically knew that he was there.
When you made eye contact with him and, like,
he physically stopped in his tracks and had to come up with an excuse of why he was approaching me.
The thing about that is you could have described him to police.
Yes.
If you had needed to.
Absolutely. And I can still think of what he looks like.
Because you made eye contact with him, which is a thing that I don't tend to do because, you know, I don't make eye contact with people. It's just who I am. Like,
I do it less if I'm intimidated by people, but, like, if I'm comfortable with someone, I will obviously look at them in the eye when I'm talking to them. Or if I'm purposely being intimidating, I'll almost stare a bitch down. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was doing. But it scared me. Mm-hmm. And I drove around for a while to make sure that
no one was following you.
Yeah, I made sure, like, I watched him walk back into the store before I left.
Yeah, there have been definitely times where I've been like, this person follows me for, you know, if they don't turn on this next street, I'm going to be concerned. Mm-hmm. And usually they do.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had that too, where I was driving around Anchorage with my boyfriend at one time. Forget why we were in town, but we were in town for something, and this dude was like following us like hardcore. And you know, I was a lot more brazen of a driver when I was a teenager. But let's just, you know, I lost him. It was fine. But there's no doubt in my mind that that guy in Fairbanks wanted to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I felt that intention.
Well,
in what way, I don't know.
I was binging Red Web,
Mm-hmm.
which is another mystery podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And
are we still recording? Sorry.
Yeah, one of them had mentioned that they, you know, when you get those gut feelings, a lot of times, like there's a gut feeling and then there's a gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like your brain has picked up, the way that they described it is like your brain has picked up on something that you have not consciously picked up on.
Yes.
So, and usually, like, you can tell the difference. I don't know that I've ever had one of those, like, intense, like, I am in danger sort of feelings. But there are so many stories where people have been like, I don't know what I picked up on, but it was something, and then, you know, XYZ happened.
Yeah.
And that's always really interesting to me, that, you know, we can pick up on stuff that we don't consciously, and that is
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, because, like, I totally get what you're saying, because, like, with that situation that I was just talking about in Fairbanks, like, I felt threatened, but it was not that intense, like, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Like, at most, I feel like he was probably gonna rob me.
Mm-hmm.
But even still.
Yeah.
That's still...
Avoid that if you can.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't have given him jack shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have kicked his ass. But, I mean...
And then that also explains, like, if we all had those intense gut feelings all the time, less people would end up in dangerous situations. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and not
because,
even that,
like,
but it's like not everyone listens to that.
Well, yeah, there's that, and then a lot of times you have people who don't necessarily aren't able to pick up on all the same kinds of things.
Yes.
People who are too young to, who haven't had, you know, I'm talking like 7-year-old children, you know?
Yeah.
Like
7 years and younger, pretty much.
Yeah.
Who don't have the social cues, the social understanding, the understanding body language, intonation.
Yeah. Well, and you also, like, it has always seemed to me that people who have grown up in kind of more dangerous parts of town, they are so much better at picking up on who's dangerous and who isn't, because you know, they've had that experience.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I've grown up in a very safe suburban middle class neighborhood. There haven't been a lot of situations where I've been in danger at home. There have been situations going to school in Anchorage and in some sketchy situations where I have had the opportunity to pick up some of those cues, but I don't necessarily feel that I would be qualified to pick up on some of the stuff that a lot of the people I've known definitely could, you know?
Yeah. Well, and, like, even, like, my thing, like, I know mine is not as, like, because same thing, I grew up in a pretty, like, you know, middle-class neighborhood, went to relatively, like, you know, normal school. I wasn't, I by all means.
Fair, you went to a public elementary and middle school, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I went public everything.
I went private.
Although I did go to an ABC school. So
yeah. I went to a private.
Take that as you will.
I went to a private elementary middle school, and we met for the first time. And we were both in public high school, which sucked. Like, I mean, the high school.
Gotta love the casual insulting of Belle today.
The casual insulting of the U.S. school system. So, like, kind of what I'm saying, like, I didn't pick up on some of those. There was, like,
I was extremely protected.
There was this, like, drastic difference between going to a charter school and going to a public high school.
Yeah.
Where suddenly everything is completely different. Like, you are expected to know how to do things that I'd never done before. Like, you're expected to know, like, where you turn in your homework, you know, like, and I was like, I just handed it to my teacher every day, you know, for literally my entire schooling. I handed it to my teacher. And now there was a basket, and I didn't know. Oh.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's literally down to those tiny little things where people know, like, you know, and I mean, this is fucking, that school building was the worst. Oh, so you, like, even if you knew what you were doing, you couldn't find your classroom the first year. Yeah. But it was like, I didn't even have the general concept of, like, what direction are all of the classrooms in this number going to be, you know? Like, and it was, because this...
We also had a multi-level school, which I know might be surprising for being like, oh, you went to high school in Alaska. It's a pretty small building. It wasn't a small building. No, it was probably small in comparison to anyone who lives literally anywhere else, but it was pretty fucking big for us.
The classrooms were numbered by a madman. Like,
oh my god, it made no sense.
There was no, like, direct, like there wasn't an order.
Well, and then it's like you had this weird block of schools that was like, or classrooms, the one by the front by the library where you literally, like, went down the stairs and it was like that one block and then you went back up the stairs.
It was literally like a single hallway of downstairs.
People thought, like, I had family members who also went to the same high school that we did, literally thought I was lying, and I was like, it's fucking there. I'm like, I used to have to go up the stairs with my fucking bum knee.
Yeah, there were hallways, like, senior hall, you shared a locker, but when there were hallways and hallways full of lockers that were never assigned to anybody. Like, this was the weirdest, like, school.
Yeah.
Not that, you know, I'm sure all American high schools are just as fucking weird, but, you know.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what I was talking about. Anyway, it was literally this situation where, like, you know, in charter school where I didn't pick up on things like that I was surrounded by anti-vaxxers until, like, very recently. Like, because it wasn't a situation in which it should be, like, I was gaining these, like, I was getting practice picking up on dangerous situations. The only times that sketchy things happened are when we left the school and the teachers weren't paying attention, which happened frequently. But anyway, so, but I suddenly come to high school, and I think part of the issue is that in this charter school, everybody wanted to pretend everything is fairies and rainbows. Like,
there is no war in Bossing City.
Yeah. Like, everything is perfect, and we're all recycling, and we're gonna save the world, and, like...
I really hope that comes off as creepy as I was hoping it to be.
Hopefully. But then you go to high school, and everybody knows kids do drugs, and kids know how to get drugs, and kids do weird things, people hurt people, like, you know, the
random fist fights that would happen at, like, 7:30 in the morning.
Like, I went from this place where like, you know, all throughout elementary and high school, everybody, you know, believed in fairies, basically. You know, that's the kind of situation that you're in, where you talk about, like, you know, you read the Tompton. I don't know if that's
that is not a universal experience.
Okay. It's a Swedish, I think, children's book about, like, a gnome wandering around on Christmas Day. Anyway, it's a cute book. But anyway.
I mean, to be fair, I don't even think you and I have talked about some of the shit that I got into, like, with... I had a really weird group of friends before, when I was in middle school, And I just don't talk about that time in my life.
Yeah.
I'm like, I try and forget that it existed, because then I tried to reach out to one of the friends that I had to try and talk to her, and she was like, what are you talking about? But I know I didn't imagine that shit, because I'm like, I'm not that creative, but like, it was weird.
But like,
some weird ass fucking friends.
No,
Public
I had some
school,
weird ones
man.
too, yeah. But in public school, nobody's pretending that everything is perfect, you know?
Yeah.
And that's literally, I went from a situation where everybody pretended everything was perfect to
sheltered.
Yeah, a situation where nobody was. And it was a massive culture like, I cannot describe to you.
I kind of get it in a similar sense where it's like, I can't imagine that level of culture shock, but like, I still have a level of that culture shock, because, and this is going to sound so weird. So I went from an elementary school that was an ABC school, which is like, you know, like in between private and public.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what it was. Although, did you know they're trying to shut that school down? I'm like, I'm disappointed. That school was bitchin'. Either way, so I also grew up pretty sheltered. And then my school, we had the option of, it was elementary was K through 6, but our middle school also went 6 through 8. So I had a choice of either staying at the ABC school for 6th grade or going to middle school for 6th grade. My 6th grade class had 13 people.
Okay. Yeah. That's...
And then on top of that, not only was I a very sheltered person, I was incredibly socially awkward, and it gave the opportunity for a lot of people to emotionally manipulate me. And that happened. And I've learned a lot from it, but I'm also like, even at 16, 17, I discovered that I was still so much more sheltered than I thought I was.
Well, that's the thing, is that, like, as much as people who have been in rough situations pick up on stuff that people who have been really sheltered don't pick up on, that doesn't mean that it's an advantage to grow up.
It's a trauma response.
Yeah. So, like, we should live in a world where nobody has to pick up on that thing, on those sorts of things. But unfortunately...
Well, and you know what? It's also not just people who grew up in, you know, in those dangerous situations. It's anyone who grew up different.
Yeah.
So I've always been a heavier set kid. The reason I feel I understand social cues so much better is because I had to learn very quickly who was being my friend for being my friend, and who was like, I've been asked out multiple times. I've been asked out on dates as a joke multiple times. And I still remember those fuckers' names.
Good.
And it's almost always the goddamn popular guys.
Yeah.
And then you had your two fucking weirdos who asked you out.
Yeah.
You had some creepers.
Yeah, well, there's the, like, I came back from 10 months in Russia, so, like, I had spent, like, you know, my junior year I wasn't there. And then I came back and I had lost, like, 50 pounds or something. So, like, you know, weighed significantly less. And you could feel the difference in the way that people treated me.
That's what I hate so much about the idea of losing weight. Is it's like, I don't want people... You either accept me as I am, or don't talk to me. Because if you're only with me because I look a certain way...
Yeah. And there's a nihilistic part of me that's like, what's the point in losing weight when...
That's the reaction?
Yeah.
Yeah!
Like, yeah.
It's like, it really almost makes you want to start dating someone at your size, or at your weight, at your size, whatever, at your current physical appearance, and then...
Well, and it's not even, like, because... It's not even just that. It's just in general. People treat you better. Like...
Yeah!
And it's, like... I had somebody, and this was... no, okay, I don't believe it was just a translation error. But this was a Russian woman who had said to me she said the words, "Now that you are pretty, you should start dressing in better clothes." Like, the exact words, "Now that you are pretty." And I was like, oh, Go fuck yourself, like.
I'm gonna go throw some hands with a Russian lady, because, like, first of all, I hate the phrase conventionally attractive.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that phrase. I think everyone is attractive, and I think that as long as you have a beautiful personality and, like, are actually kind, like, that's what makes a person attractive, not physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's some fuckers out there that are goddamn fucking pretty. Hello,
Yeah.
Jensen Ackles. If you ever listen to this shit, hi. But I'm never gonna go to a convention. Like, it's not gonna happen. And also, I refuse to be that type of person that's like, oh my god. Like, I'm not that type of person. But it's also like,
But watch that clip go viral.
right? Just be like, hi. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd be fucking speechless. You know why? Because he's a fucking giant. He's so tall. He's so tall. But, like, anyway, moving on from the point, is it's like, you do have people who are, like, outside of the norm of, like, conventionally attractive into being like, holy shit, that person is gorgeous. But unless, you can be the most attractive person in the world, but if you are a dirtbag on the inside, guess what? You're not fucking attractive.
Yeah.
But, so I hate well, now that you're pretty.
Yeah. There were a lot of, like, fucked up things about that.
Yeah.
But there was generally, you know.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a bullshit episode. We will see you next week for a researched one.
And next week,
For our real one.
No, next week we'll be returning to our regularly scheduled programming.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Wild Mystery Podcast Appears, recorded and produced by Ollie and Belle.
Please check out all of our social media where we have additional information shared. You can find all of those links at our website at awmpa.com.
We'd love to hear your feedback for our podcast, so be sure to rate and review.
Tune in next week for another episode of A Wild Mystery Podcast Appears.